Oh, sorry about that, everybody. Okay, so we are recording. It's up to you if you would like to take notes. You will have this material to refer back to. We also have it in a PowerPoint presentation that we'll send via email once this webinar is complete. Okay, so back to introductions. My name is Nicole Scrivener. I already mentioned that I am an admissions essay reviewer for Heartland. I'm also a college graduate with a Bachelor of Arts in English, and I've been a professional writer for more than 12 years. So I'm here to speak to you both as someone who has gone through the process and is currently helping others go through the process, but also as a writer. So I'm really trying to speak from that space, give you a little bit of coaching. Tonight we'll be here for somewhere around 30 to 40 minutes, depending on how long questions go, maybe a little bit longer. So think about this as your own private English class. We already talked about how this will work. So again, it is being recorded, just so you know. Okay, we're gonna start with this. I wanna take you through a little bit of an exercise on determining your personal brand. So this is the foundation of what we'll be talking about tonight. I wanna reframe your thinking that everyone has their own brand. And so I want you to look at your admissions essay as an opportunity to communicate that brand. But before you can communicate it, you have to figure out what it is. So I have included this fun / embarrassing picture of me from when I was your age, as I was getting ready to apply for colleges. That's my senior photo. I was not very cool. I'm sure you all are much cooler than I was. But what I did have was a pretty good grasp on what my personal brand was. So I want to encourage you to start thinking about that as well. Give me just a second. It says my screen sharing is pausing. Is anyone having problems seeing the presentation? You can go ahead and unmute and let me know.
Yeah, it's still loading for me.
Interesting.
It's like the screen is frozen.
Okay. I'm going to stop the share and then resume the share. Give me just a second. What about now?
That's better.
We can see it.
Great. Thank you so much for turning on your mic and letting me know. I appreciate that. Okay, so to determine your personal brand, I want you to think about your story. Everyone has a story, and from that story that you have, you're going to pull out some positive attributes from your life so far that you think describe who you are. So if we use high school Nicole as the example, I've come up with 3 words that I think pretty well summarize me at that time. I was an overachiever. I took a lot of advanced placement and college prep courses. I was an officer in the National Honor Society. I was also an intern. I was already kind of working in my field in high school through a PSEO opportunity. And I was a leader in my class. I was the editor of the school newspaper and the secretary of the language club. So those were 3 words that I would have used to describe what my personal brand was in high school. Each of you have these words for yourself. And so your challenge is to start thinking about yourself in those terms. What are 3 to 5 positive attributes from your story thus far in your, however many probably teenage years of life you've had? What are 3 to 5 positive words or attributes that you can pull from your story that you could communicate strongly? So I realize that might be a new concept to some of you. Kind of just start noodling it a little bit and we'll keep talking about it. Our first pro tip for the evening, your college admissions essay needs to put your personal brand in writing. So let's talk about that a little bit more. The first step in this process for you, obviously, once you kind of identify what these colleges are that you want to apply to, is to see what essay topics they're offering for the year that you're applying. So 2 questions to ask: which prompt, as you're making that choice, which essay topic you want to write on, 2 questions to ask yourself are, first of all, which prompt will you have the most examples or stories to share from in support of your answer? And then the second one is, which prompt are you most excited to write? Because that enthusiasm will come through in your writing. We're going to spend some more time talking about that in a couple slides. Another pro tip, this is a real time saver. A lot of times you'll find that different colleges and universities, well, first of all, there's something called the Common App that has all of the same questions for multiple different colleges. Colleges choose whether or not they want to utilize Common App or whether they want to come up with their own questions. But even if they're coming up with their own questions, you'll find that there's a lot of overlap between different colleges and universities. So if you're applying to multiple colleges and universities that have a similar question, that gives you the opportunity to write one essay and submit it to multiple colleges, which is a real time-saving effort for you as you're going through this process. So if you've heard the old adage, killing two birds with one stone, that's what you do if you happen to find that two places you're applying to are asking essentially the same question. You can use the same essay twice. Okay, so as an admissions essay reviewer for Heartland, we see, some of the same mistakes pop up again and again. And I'm hoping that as you go through this, it'll save you, those oops moments, maybe put you a little bit ahead of the curve. So let's talk about some mistakes that we see at Heartland and how to avoid them. The first one I think is choosing the essay that a student thinks the admissions officer wants to read instead of the one they want to write. So that kind of goes back to what I was talking about in the pro tip, that if you are excited to write one of these essays, if you read the question and it sparks a little bit of something in you and you think, oh man, I know how I would answer that question, that's the essay you should be writing. Maybe there's another one on the list that you think would make you sound smarter, or maybe it sounds better, the question itself. But if you're not excited to write it, then the quality of your writing will be reflected. What you want to do is you want to write the essay that you're most excited to write. That will improve the quality of your writing and the strength of your answers. A second one that I see a lot is essays that have a negative tone. Now, I think that when students do this, they're usually on to something, which is that good writing creates emotion for the reader. And so they've already kind of discovered the first secret, which is that a good essay should make someone feel something. But remember that oftentimes applying for colleges and universities is a bit of a competitive process. And you want to leave that essay reviewer at the institution that you're applying to with a positive feeling about you. And it kind of goes back to this idea of your personal brand. So strong brands have positive associations with them, and you want the essay reviewer to feel positively about you. And so hopefully in your writing, you want to create a positive emotion on their end. Another one I see the most, and I would say this is one of the most obvious as we're reading, is when someone has a story in their mind that they want to tell, but it doesn't exactly fit the prompt. And so they're forcing the story to fit the prompt when it doesn't. So, sorry, let me go back. In that case, I think there's a bit of a hard choice to be made where you kind of have to let that story go and start thinking about another story or example from your life that you can actually fit to the prompt instead of coming in with a story in mind. So don't be too attached to the story you want to tell until you see what your essay question options are. Number 4, I'm sure you've heard this, failing to plan is planning to fail. Another old adage that rings true here. As you are backing out your dates from when your applications are due, I would say come up with a schedule that fits the strength of writer that you feel like you are. If you love writing, if it's your passion, then maybe you don't need as much time as someone else who doesn't have as much confidence when it comes to writing. That person might need to plan out some more time. We're going to talk a little bit more about what that schedule could look like a few slides ahead, but make sure that you're not saving your essay till the last minute. Make sure that you're putting dates on the calendar and backing up from those dates to give yourself plenty of time to not just write, but edit. And that brings us to number 5, spending all of your time writing when editing is just as important. So you should be spending as much time editing as you are writing. And so if you feel like you can craft a strong essay in 2 weeks, you need to spend 2 weeks editing as well. And I would say that that is about the minimum that any student should be spending on their college admissions essay, is about 4 weeks. Now, that doesn't mean 4 weeks every night at your computer writing. That means, continue to revisit this essay, continue to write over the course of a few days, come back to it over and over again so that you're fresh. And then over the course of 2 weeks of editing, if we're talking about that minimum schedule, just check in with it every couple days, spend a couple hours with it every few days. I think that the more times you revisit a piece of writing, the stronger it is, as opposed to just spending one night writing an entire essay and then one night editing an entire essay. I would recommend that you, like I said, just keep revisiting it. Just write a paragraph, come back the next day, add a paragraph, and then use the same approach with your editing. Another one I see a lot is overcomplicating language in the essay. And so this is when we talk about like that $10 word that's a super long word that means a very specific thing. Most of the time, that's actually just going to be a distraction for your reader. When in doubt, simplify is what I would tell any writer. It's more important that you answer the prompt effectively than that you sound smart. So clarity, I think, is really important in writing for college admissions essays, making sure that your sentence structure isn't overcomplicated, making sure that your word choice isn't overcomplicated. Use words that communicate your thoughts, feelings, story, more than words that just sound smart. Mistake number 7 is forgetting to tell a story. Your story is part of your brand. So what we see a lot is an essay that is essentially a retelling of the application. The essay oftentimes will list all of the extracurriculars and the grades that a student is getting and the sports they're involved in, but it's not really telling a story. It's just a different format of the application. So your essay is really an opportunity for you to communicate your brand in a positive way. And the easiest way to do that, the most effective way to do that, is storytelling. Everyone loves to hear and tell a story. And I just want to challenge you to think about your college admissions essay like that it's an opportunity to tell a story. And that story should reflect your brand that we talked about earlier, which we'll revisit here in a little bit. Along with that is this mistake of telling instead of showing. Examples and stories are how you show the reader what you're saying is true. So back to that kind of retelling of the application. If you're the captain of the football team, if you are the valedictorian of your class, these are great things to communicate in an essay, but you want to do it using illustrations rather than just saying, I was this thing. So tell a story from your time as the football captain, or tell a story about how you overcame challenges and rose to the top of your class to become valedictorian, instead of just saying, I was this thing. Show them how you got there. Show them what that experience was like for you through storytelling. And then when you show a reader through storytelling that these things are true, they have to believe it, right? As opposed to just telling them. When you show it, it's proven. So kind of think about it like that. Mistake number 9, if you're not feeling it, the admissions officer won't feel it either. So if you have written this essay and you're going through it and you're not feeling an emotion as you're reading it, you're not feeling confident about it, that is there's no way you're going to be able to slide that past the essay's admission review or the essay reviewer at the college. They're not going to be feeling it either. So this is kind of a benchmark for you, that if you feel like you've gone through the process and you're still not feeling confident about it, you need to bring some other people into the process. That could be a parent, that could be a friend, that could be a favorite teacher or a counselor at your school. Maybe bring in some extra resources to get, or obviously Heartland, that's what we're here for. If you're using our services, we're here just to do specifically that. But bring someone else into the process and start asking them, what could I do to make this have an impact on you, and start working from that direction. And then number 10 means the number 10 mistake is losing your focus, which means losing your reader. We're going to talk about a strategy called the 5-paragraph essay that is guaranteed to keep you from having this experience. And we'll talk about that. Pro tip: the 5-paragraph essay format is designed to help you keep your focus from intro to conclusion. So this is the answer to kind of mistake number 10. This is something that we do see where a writer might start out strong in their introduction, and then somewhere in those middle paragraphs and then in the conclusion, they've kind of lost their pace, they've lost their path, and where they end isn't exactly where they started, and it's not where they intended to end either. So if you have not studied the 5-paragraph essay at school, or even if you have, this is a good time to recap. This is the best tool for the unconfident reader or the unconfident writer. If you don't feel like a really strong writer, the 5-paragraph essay is your best friend. It tells you exactly what you need to do, and it kind of hits the mark every time if you follow it the way it's meant to be followed. So it's called the 5-paragraph essays because there are 5 paragraphs. You start with an intro, you have 3 supporting paragraphs and 1 paragraph conclusion. Your introduction should rephrase the prompt in your own words. So it should restate what you read in the prompt and tell the reader how you plan to answer the question being asked. So it kind of sets an expectation for the reader. I'm going to tell this story, or start the story, so they kind of know how you're going to answer the question for them. And then your supporting paragraph should be 3 examples and or stories that support the answer you gave in the introduction. So they should prove what you stated in their introduction. And then your conclusion should tell the reader how you answered the question that was being asked using the examples and or stories as support. So that might feel a little bit clunky. We're going to work through an example together, kind of going back to that first slide I showed you of my own personal brand in high school. I'm going to walk through what, if I was that person today, what my college admissions essay might look like using this 5-paragraph format and communicating my personal brand that we've already talked about. So working through this example, let's pretend the prompt is, what was the most formative experience of your high school education? That's a question that's still being asked today. It was also being asked when I was applying to college. It's the perfect essay prompt for telling a story because it's asking for a story. So let's use this one as an example. If I'm going to answer that question, I'm going to talk about this journalism conference that I went to at Columbia University when I was a high school junior coming from a relatively small town, spending a week in New York City where I'd never been before. So there's just a lot of ground here for me to tell some good stories because, you know, it was a pretty big experience for me at that time. So I'm going to say in my introduction that I plan to answer this question, what was the most formative experience of my high school education, with the answer, the journalism conference that I went to at Columbia University. I'm going to communicate that right in my introduction, that I plan to talk about this to answer this question. And then in my supporting paragraphs, I'm going to think about my personal brand and come up with some examples that are going to help me communicate that. So I think my other options were that I was a leader, an intern, and an overachiever, right? I think those are the 3 words that I chose for my personal brand. So I'm going to talk about how I raised funds by myself to send myself on that trip. I'm going to talk about how I helped my classmates navigate the campus. And I'm going to talk about how we got lost on the metro and solved that problem. You know, getting lost in New York City when you're 17 can be a little bit harrowing, but we got through it. So it's a good story to tell. And then in the conclusion, I'm going to wrap everything up by making the statement that college is about learning and problem solving. And I'm looking forward to doing that even more at the college or university of my choosing, you know, which kind of goes back to the intro where it was this journalism conference where I learned those lessons. These are the 3 ways that I was able to solve this challenge during this formative experience. And here's what I'm taking from that today as I apply for this college. So you see how it kind of becomes a big circle. We're going from beginning to end and back again. And it creates a strong essay using this 5-paragraph essay format. Another pro tip, as you're reading through your essay in the editing phase, make sure that your essay is a good reflection of your personal brand. So if I were you, I would start tonight just thinking about what those 3 to 5 words are that are positive words that are reflections of you. I would put them on a Post-it note. I would stick them in your room or wherever you do your writing. And when you're getting to the step of writing these essays, some of you are probably already there. Some of you might be years ahead. You want to keep referring back to this Post-it note as you go through your editing process and make sure that those words are being effectively communicated in your essay so that you're leaving that positive impression with the reviewer, with the admissions officer, so that you're communicating your personal brand in a way that's meaningful and impactful. And I think more than this, it's just good for students this age, young adults that are going into adulthood, to start thinking about themselves this way, because your personal brand is going to be something that you need to communicate to your professors through college, and it's going to be something that you need to bring with you into a competitive work environment too. I also think it's just good for students to think about them through this positive, think about themselves through this positive sort of brain shift. We can be really hard on ourselves, but there are great things about each of you. They're not going to be the same words that I chose. There are 3 to 5 words that work for you, and I think it's also meaningful and impactful to think about yourself from that perspective. Okay, question time. Let's see. I don't see any questions yet, but now would be a good time to send them if you have them. Let's see. Does the 5-paragraph essay format work for UC essays? Can you send me what you mean by UC, or if anyone does know, feel free to drop it in. Let's see, what is a formative experience? So a formative experience would be some big experience in your life that changed or impacted you in some way, in some meaningful way. So something that you lived through in your life that changed you, hopefully for the better. So formative experiences that I've seen in essays used are, people that are first generation Americans, people that may have moved states in high school at kind of a crucial time. Trying to think of some other good examples. If I come up with any more, I'll drop them in there. What do you think about schools who do not rank? I assume they mean like they're not naming valedictorians or salutatorians. I mean, I think that colleges have gotten used to that process, and so they're just looking at that GPA and hopefully, that measurement. I think if you're a really strong student, that comes through in your GPA, whether you were named valedictorian or not. In the conclusion, should you state why you want to go to that particular college? Absolutely. I think if there's an opportunity to communicate that, the conclusion is a great place to do it. It kind of depends on the essay question, specifically how you communicate that. But if you can tie it to your story and how that led you to choosing this college, that's even more strong an essay to be writing. How many words are good enough? Well, you want to get as close to that word limit as possible without going over. So there are times where really strong essays can be written in even fewer words, maybe even half the words, but I would say use your space to your advantage and use it wisely. How do you differentiate multiple essays for the same institute? I don't know that I've seen examples of students having to do multiple full-length essays. I know that I've seen some institutions asking for one essay and then a couple short answer questions. But if there was an institute asking for multiple full-length essays, I would say they all need to stand alone, and you need to kind of dig into your life experiences so far and pick out a couple strong examples as opposed to just relying on one. I would say you should not use the 5-paragraph. Sorry, someone said, should we use the 5-paragraph essay format for essays which have a low word count? Probably not, but you can kind of use that same thinking even in your short answers, that you want to start by answering the questions, give an example to support your answer, and then wrap it up with something impactful. So, you could even turn that into 3 sentences. You could really distill that 5-paragraph essay into a 3-sentence answer too, using that format. Should we state all of our achievements? Because colleges might think we're bragging about how good we are. You should absolutely state all of your achievements on your application. And then you should find ways to communicate those achievements in your essay without being super obvious. So maybe pick the ones that you think make you the most competitive, that make you stand out the most, and then focus on those ones, but absolutely have them all on your application. Someone said, would you say sob stories are better than something you're passionate about? No. I think there are ways to take sob stories and communicate them in a story that becomes about the triumph, not about the trial. So that goes back to one of our, I forget which number it was, one of our common mistakes is writing an essay that has an overall negative tone. You don't want to do that because ultimately you're leaving a negative impression with the admissions officer. If you can talk about a negative thing, but spin it into how you overcame that obstacle, where the triumph is, as opposed to how hard it is. And then also focus on how it shaped your character. Hard things shape our character. And so you want to focus on the positive there. Some cliches to avoid. So this came up in another one of these presentations I did. Here's what I'll say. There are tons of cliches. A couple of them that come up a lot are, if you came from a family of modest means, so your family, if your family was below poverty line, if you are a first generation college attender, if you had a hard time assimilating to American culture, these are things that we see often in essays. But every once in a while, I will see an essay that is so strong that takes one of those areas that we see a lot, one of those stories that we see a lot, and re-communicates it in a completely different, beautiful, powerful way. So I wouldn't necessarily tell anyone to shy away from parts of their story that might be common. I would just challenge you to communicate it in a new way. Don't rely on cliches to communicate it. try and communicate it in a more authentic, unique way. If a prompt asks about leadership experience, does it have to be school or academics related? Absolutely not. Nope. I think if you have strong leadership experience outside of school or academics, use that. I think it's more important that you're telling an interesting, compelling story than it is to rely purely on academics. What if you don't get to choose what prompt you have to write about? Then use all of the tips I gave tonight, except for the one about how to choose your essay, because you have to use that one anyways. I'm trying to think if I've seen that either where a college is only offering one choice. I don't know if I've seen that or not, but if that happens, then yeah, you just have to really dig deep to come up with a story from your own personal experience that can still answer that question. What should a person who has participated in a lot of things but has not led them highlight or approach the essay? I think that's a great essay already, what you're talking about. If you're the kind of person that joins into everything and gives it your all, but you're not a leader, I think that's a really valuable person. I think you should write an essay about why that person matters. Honestly, I would love to read that essay. No one's saying that. Everyone's saying that they're the captain and the president and the leader and the best. If you're the person who joins everything and really digs deep to get involved, that's an amazing essay. There's your essay right there. Would these tips apply to scholarship applications as well? Absolutely. And maybe even more so because scholarships tend to be a smaller pool of applicants and they tend to want essays that pull on the heartstrings more. So I think storytelling becomes even more important in that area. But again, make sure you're kind of working on keeping that positive tone. Not that we're only saying positive things, but that we're talking about positive or negative things in a positive way, because we're focusing on the outcome, not on how hard it was. Someone said one essay for all schools. Not sure that I totally understand that question, but there's not one essay question that works. The odds of being able to write one essay for all of your schools are probably low. But what you could do is a couple of your colleges could have roughly the same question being asked, and you could use your essay for multiple colleges, not necessarily all though. You have reviewed many. Can you share your best ones with examples? Also, how does a student define branding? So let's go with the second question first. How do we define branding? Branding is the parts of your character that make you who you are. When we're talking about personal branding, they're the things about you that make you you. They're what make you different from the person sitting next to you. They're what make you different from someone across the country. They're the attributes, the character traits that make you different. So that's your brand. And then remember that we want to kind of spin those in a positive light because you want your brand to leave a positive impression. The essays I've reviewed, someone asked me this last time, I should have pulled some more this time, but I will say the best essay I ever wrote was about juggling. The best essay I ever reviewed was about juggling. It was someone who was telling a story about all of the things that they juggled in high school, but they were telling it from the perspective of being an actual juggler. So this guy was a juggler. He was a professional juggler. Even in high school, he got paid to do parties and stuff. And he kind of told the story of juggling while he talked about the things that he was juggling in high school. Now you're asking for the best examples. This was the best example. I've read tons of strong essays that weren't quite that unique. But the ones that I think rose to the top for me as best were the ones that told a personal story and then they connected their high school self to their future college self through that story. And that was kind of the example that I tried to give you guys tonight. It kind of tells a story of where I started in my life, who it's made me today, and how I plan to take that person into college to grow even more. I would say that all of the best college admissions essays I've read kind of fit that model where they're talking about their past, present, and future selves through story. How far should you take the story concept? For instance, dialogue, dialect, humor, metaphor? Great question. I have seen lots of strong essays that use all of those writing elements, and it's different and it's interesting, and sometimes it's really fun and sometimes it's funny. So I think if you feel confident using those story elements, those writing elements, use them. As long as they fit the prompt and you feel confident using them, use them. You don't have to, but I think you can go as far as you want to, so long as you feel like you're hitting the mark. These stories have to be about when we were in high school, right? No, I think you can pull stories from your childhood. Absolutely. I think whatever, that's going to depend on the question. And I would recommend that you, I'm going to look at something on my phone real quick, just so it's not a distraction as we're on here, and see if I can look at Common App real quick and give a couple examples of essay questions. Let me see, because that might give you an example of how. Okay, I don't think I'll be able to do it quickly. I would recommend that you look at Common App, just Google Common App, and you'll be able to find on the Common App website some of the questions they've asked in the past. They may even have the questions for this year. And those are a pretty good reflection of the kinds of questions that you'll see as you're applying for college. And those questions are really going to determine which stories you tell, which stories you pick. And I would say there are going to be questions where maybe storytelling isn't an easy option to utilize, but for the most part, you can almost always tell a story in these essays. Okay. How do you figure out what to write about if you don't have anything interesting or character building? Everyone has something interesting in character building. Let's say you're 17 years old today. In your 17 years, there's absolutely something interesting in your character building that's happened. And if you feel like you can't come up with those, I would, again, enlist the help of someone near to you, a parent, a sibling, a friend, counselor, high school teacher that you have nearby, and kind of help them workshop that with you, because I believe that in your 17 years, there's something that's happened or something you've done in your life that's helped create who you are today. Yes, you can absolutely, and you should be sending your essay to the coaches to review once you're done. That's what the coaches are here for. If you're currently using Heartland and you have a coach, they want you to send them your essay when you're done, and then it will go to one of us, one of the essay reviewers, and we'll review your essay, and then we'll send the feedback back to your coach, and then your coach will communicate that to you. You must take advantage of that if it's available to you. Have I seen any other essay formats besides 5 paragraph? Absolutely. And I've seen essay formats. Are there any official ones? Not that I know of, but I've seen essays that didn't use the 5 paragraph format and were very strong. And I've seen essays that didn't use the 5 paragraph essay format and were very weak. So like I said, I think the 5 paragraph essay is a really good tool for writers who don't feel confident in their writing, because I know that if you use it right, it's going to answer the question that's being asked. If you feel like you're a super strong writer, don't rely on the 5 paragraph essay. You might use it to help you frame your thinking and your planning, but maybe you'll choose to work outside of that as you actually write your essay. That's fine. There are examples of great essays that don't use it, but just know that it's there as a tool for you if you don't feel confident or if you get stuck. Are there any literary devices, I think maybe you mean writing devices, that colleges would be impressed if we use it? No, not specifically. I mean, I think, you could maybe talk to your English teacher about that a little bit and see if they have any advice based on the questions that are an option for you, or ask your coach at Heartland if they have any suggestions there. I'm saying your English teacher just because that's a very specific English question. But I think dialogue works. I think metaphor works. I think imagery works. You just have to kind of plan that based on the essay questions that are being asked. Should humor be used in an essay? Absolutely. Please make me laugh as I'm reading it. I've definitely laughed reading these essays before. Make your admissions officer laugh when they're reading it. Yes, humor is a great tool. Where can I find inspiration for my essays? Well, you can definitely Google best college admissions essays and find some great ones out there if you want some inspiration. And I think that personal brand exercise could help you too, that, coming up with 3 to 5 positive words about yourself and putting them on a Post-it note. I think you start there to find that inspiration as well. Kind of start thinking about some stories from your life and how they fit to your personal brand, and whether they'll give you opportunities to communicate that. Do you think we could alter our story to kind of speak directly to the admissions officer? Yeah, I think that would be really cool. As like a writing technique, I think that would be a fun option if you talk to them directly. I think there'd be a way to do that, and it could be really creative and impactful. And when you use these kind of more elevated writing techniques, if you feel comfortable using them, they can leave a really good impression with the admissions officer. Another question, my girls are 2 years apart and do the same sports and basically everything is the same. Can they use the same story but told through their own eyes, but basically the same story? Yeah, I think so. I mean, I would ask them if they want to do that. They might feel like this is an opportunity to differentiate, or maybe they don't. I think that's fine. It would certainly, they'd be able to kind of share that writing time together to maybe make each other's writing stronger, which I think could be helpful. Yes, we will share the presentation slides. They're going to come out in an email probably in the next 24 hours, I would say. When applying, where do we find the prompts? They'll just be right on the application. I'm not sure how it works these days, but I remember when I applied, the essay section was the last portion of the application. So I had to go through all of the filling out the individual sections. And then at the end is typically where they give you your essay options. And then you typically are able to choose which question you want to answer and then craft that essay. Okay, it is 8:42 right now. I'm going to give just a minute for a couple more questions if there are any. I saw someone said put their email in. I think that when you registered, they will have your email. You also can, if you're part of the Heartland program, you can ask your coach. I think they'll be able to get this to you as well. Any additional questions? I'll give it one more minute. Thanks for your time, everybody, tonight. Again, I'm Nicole Scrivener. I'm here with Heartland tonight. It was great to spend the evening with you. I hope that this was helpful to you. If you ever did want to reach out and ask additional questions, I'll go ahead and put my email address in the chat right now. You're free to reach out. You could even just ask your coach if you're part of Heartland. They can put you in touch with me as well. I appreciate your time. And I'm so excited for you guys to start on this journey, thinking about your personal brand, communicating that through story. I know you all can do it. Have a great night and good luck.